reading books, reflection, and experience. What do these three elements mean in our lives? Looking closely, we can see this is precisely the Listen-Contemplate-Practice formula that Buddha taught 2,600 years ago. Reading books is listen, learn, reflection is contemplation, reflect, and experience is practice, application. What's interesting is when we observe successful people around the world, regardless of which continent they come from, they automatically synthesize very similar principles. There's no difference in their formula for success. Everything returns to these fundamental principles. So how much time have you dedicated to these three important activities? Each week, can you set aside 5 hours for reading books, reflection, and experiencing new knowledge? Take attendance and check if you've maintained this habit yet. It's notable that successful people are often very intelligent in how they use their time. Their 5 hours are typically of high quality and efficiency. If we haven't achieved their level of productivity, perhaps we need to dedicate more time. Try to set aside 1 to 2 hours each day for reading, reflection, and experiencing that knowledge. This way, we can hope to achieve about 10 hours of quality learning per week. If you maintain this habit for 10 to 20 years, you'll see a clear difference between yourself and friends who only know how to go drinking without reading, reflecting, or experiencing. This gap will grow increasingly wider over time. In international CEO circles, the moment someone says, "I studied at West Point," people view them with a different gaze, as a special entity, a perfect human beyond ranking. This is thanks to the incredibly diverse and comprehensive education program there. From knowledge about the universe to the proper way to shake hands, from the art of wine appreciation to how to fold bedding, from debates on Victor Hugo's works to deep insights about human nature. You could say it's an environment where students are knowledgeable about astronomy above, geology below, and human psychology in between. From the moment they enter the school, students' spirits are tempered by being plunged into 100-degree boiling water and then immediately into ice water, preparing them psychologically so that later in life, no matter what crisis they encounter, they feel calm and unwavering. Did you notice something unusual in that passage? It's about the teaching method. Do we teach children with love or with challenge? The answer is challenge. Do you see the difference? Let's observe a child's development process. When a person is still below 5 points, still weak, should they be taught with love or challenge? When they're weak, emotionally weak, physically weak, love is necessary. But when they've crossed the 5-point threshold, even reaching 6 points, meaning they're already stable, is love still necessary? No longer. They're relatively steady, and only challenge can push them up to 9 points. When someone can already walk on their own 2 feet and we still jump in to protect them, it's useless and we might unintentionally kill their ability to be independent. At this point, we need to create barriers for them to overcome, to create challenges. That's the philosophy of West Point. This school recruits students with standards so high it's considered the #1 school in the world. Harvard doesn't even compare. In fact, students who fail at West Point are often accepted by Harvard. If you want your child to enter Harvard, try to get them accepted to West Point, and after a year, if they're expelled, Harvard will offer them a scholarship to continue their studies. West Point's campus spans 65 square kilometers. Each year, the school accepts 1,300 first-year students, but by the 4th year, only 900 remain. Every year, they expel about 100 students, regardless of whether they're academically strong or weak, as long as they fall into the bottom group. That student's career at West Point ends. And schools like Harvard, MIT, and Stanford lined up to welcome those 100 expelled students, ready to offer them scholarships to continue their education. Through this, you can see how incredibly rigorous West Point's training is. Their perspective is to create elite individuals, leaders, not ordinary employees. If you're to be a leader, to be among the elite, and you can't overcome such challenges, then you're not worthy of leadership. If you still fear difficulties and obstacles, how can you become a leader? First, at West Point, they confine groups of students in rooms, release them after 2 hours, and require them to answer seemingly simple questions like, how many light bulbs are in the room? What color are the tables and chairs? What time did you enter and exit the room? Is the person to your left wearing a watch? What's the name of the person sitting to your right? If you can't answer, you automatically pack your bags and go home. This first lesson is about training observation analysis synthesis. If you don't know how to observe, you failed from the very beginning. Having eyes but being blind, having ears but being deaf means you cannot go far. This is similar to when you practice Vipassana meditation. This meditation method requires you to observe inward, under tremendous pressure for an entire day, from 4 a.m. to 10 p.m. without speaking a single word, in complete silence, just closing your eyes and looking within. You must sit in meditation like a statue for 10 hours each day. Can you do it? In reality, out of 100 people, only about 1 person gives up, unable to endure. By the 3rd day, if someone collapses as if they're about to die, they're allowed to leave, but anyone who can still walk is kept in and forced to continue. But once you get past the 3rd day, things begin to get easier, and by the time you overcome the 6th day, it becomes much easier. By the 10th day, the feeling is wonderful. What is the 10th day like? You see beauty in everything around you because you've experienced suffering to its fullest extent. So when you walk out the door, everything appears beautiful. Let's observe something special about West Point. The honor code of West Point is no lying, no stealing, no cheating, no tolerance for those who violate these principles. 4 pledges, 4 promises, and all begin with the word no. Comparing with Buddhism, we have the 5 precepts: no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and no intoxication, also 5 no's. And in Christianity, the 10 commandments include 7 no's. Do you notice something? Most promises, commandments, and precepts from respected religions and institutions use the word no extensively. But interestingly, in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and positive thinking, they hate and fear the word no. They claim that using no is negative. If that were true, then Buddha and Jesus would have to be the most negative people in the world, and West Point would have to be the most negative university. But why is it ranked the #1 school in the world? This is when we need to challenge the view that using no is negative, and that we must use yes to be positive. We need to observe, analyze, and synthesize again. Otherwise, we'll get stuck in the limited thinking of a few psychologists. These values and principles must be absorbed into our blood, becoming natural reflexes, no longer something we try to remember, but something that has become a part of who we are. If you have to try to remember, the good sheep follows the Lord's teachings, you've already lost. You must practice until these values become your blood, skin, and flesh. That is the true meaning of the 8 Holy Spirits, the true meaning of baptism. When those values have soaked into your blood, transformed you, and always run alongside you. The Lord's 10 Commandments contain 7 no's. Notice that most promises and teachings use the word no extensively. Yet in NLP and positive thinking, people hate and fear the word no, believing that using no is extremely negative. By this logic, Buddha and Jesus would have to be the most negative people in the world, and West Point would have to be the most negative university. But why is West Point the #1 school in the world? That's why we need to challenge the thinking that using no is negative, and that we must use yes to be positive. Let's observe, analyze, and synthesize again, otherwise we'll get trapped in the narrow thinking of a few psychologists. Some argue that when we say no, people tend to forget it because the mind only remembers yes. According to them, when teaching no killing, people only remember killing. When teaching no stealing, people only remember stealing. If this logic were true, wouldn't all Buddhists be killing, stealing, committing sexual misconduct, lying, and getting intoxicated? Don't you see? It's absurd. There are approximately 400 to 500 million Buddhists in the world each year, and they don't fall into such behaviors. And what about the 1 billion Catholics and 1 billion Protestants, a total of 2 billion people following the 10 Commandments with 7 no's? Are they all corrupted? Clearly not. Psychological theories, especially positive psychology, need reconsideration. They're only half right and half wrong. They might be accurate for some timid individuals who fear the word no, but for those who are already stable, they actually prefer and need the word no. Notice this. Between sentences using no and those using yes, which is typically stronger? Try no tolerance for those who violate these principles. How would you rewrite it with yes? You can't, or it would become an absurd sentence. How would you change no intoxication to a positive statement? Only drink water. But that doesn't include all harmless beverages. However, no lying could be changed to always be truthful. But what's the essence of the issue? No and yes are just language. And what is language essentially? A tool. Just a tool we use in our lives. A chair is a tool, a table is a tool, and language is also a tool. And tools must be used correctly and for good purposes. Buddha called this skillful means. Is it directed toward good, and is it used skillfully and appropriately? That's all we need to concern ourselves with. Whether yes or no isn't important. What matters is whether we use it skillfully and appropriately. Some people like and are ready to change when they hear yes, but others don't change at all when hearing yes. Conversely, when you use no, they change. Therefore, whether to use yes or no depends on which context and words will help people change to make listen-contemplation-practice work. That's when you should use that word. Yes and no are just the intellectual understanding, correct? Contemplation and practice are what transform us internally. When language impacts us strongly enough, it can transform us inside. At this point, you can break free from the rigid framework of yes and no to reach a deeper understanding.